Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
And my name is Dan.
and we're here to review Game Week 39. It's really sort of hitting home how close we are to the end now. But Game Week 39, obviously a blank. How did it go for you, Dan?
Yeah, quite a good game week for me. 83 points. Um, I got Captain Grant, who was my transfer this week, took a punt on taking out Mitrovic for him. He got 14. Vice Captain Gibbs White, 12 for Bree, 11 for Baker, and Solanke for 14. Um, I was planning on having 11 players. Well, I had 12, but Naismith and Patterson didn't show up, so I ended up with only 10. So I'm quite happy with 83. Green Arrow to 142nd. Um, don't have a boost next game week, but I do have uh, basically a whole 11 of doublers, and I'll probably just bring back in Mitrovic for Grant, maybe take a -4, chase an upside somewhere, but yeah, try and damage limitation, I think, next game week.
Yeah, my game week wasn't ideal. As people knew already, I was playing the Underhaul, and I decided, in part based on where I was, that I was just sort of going to go for the Underhaul, try and really gain against everyone. So no Solanke as a starter was obviously a painful one, but I went very different with it. So I had ended up with Patterson's injury, ended up with double sort of Blackburn defence. So that was a late wipeout. I had Gardner Hickman who did nothing. Murray Wallace did nothing. I had Bree at least. A Jeb Wallace in my team who missed a penalty. Second game week in a row, one of my players has missed a penalty, which I'm not bitter about at all. I had the QPR double up in attack. I'm not sure how I only ended up with 11 points, given that I vice captained Andre Gray. 11 points from Gray and Chair combined. It felt like on another day you're sort of looking at 20 plus points from those two. From the Sunday game, I had Gibbs White at least. I captained Carlin Grant, who I thought was going to be a complete disaster, and then he did at least score the penalty. And I had Obafemi, who did nothing. So only 65 for me, which, I mean, at one point I thought I was going to be looking at sort of, maybe 50 points and a disaster. But, only an 8th place red arrow. So I'm 79th now. Bit disappointed, but I'm glad I went the way I did in terms of just fully trying to maximise it and give it a good go. It just didn't quite work out for me in the end.
I think it's just the Solanke pick. I don't think anyone saw that them winning 3-0 on another day just gets like one attack in return. And like you said, Andre Gray, I think we'll go through it, but could have he got an assist, could have had a couple more goals as well. So I don't know. I think it was worthwhile having a bit of fun. If I said numerous times, if I was playing it, I wouldn't have had Solanke either. So
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it could, and now a number of these players that have annoyed me by doing nothing, I don't have to look at in my team anymore. So best of both worlds, or at
yeah,
least that's what I'm saying. But we'll get into the games. We'll talk about some of these players that have let me down. Speaking of players from my team, we'll start off with Bristol City 2, West Brom 2. So Dan, kick us off on that one.
yeah. So like I said, took the punt on Grant coming in. Bristol City, we know, have had a bit of a leaky defence. As you can see, 2 goals conceded this week. Um, just trying to have a bit of fun. Um, didn't want to go into the game week with only 2 strikers playing, so I thought it was worthwhile going with three strikers, especially in Gaffr. Um, like you said, he did get the penalty, which was a bit of a relief as I captained him. But with what was probably West Brom's last chance of getting in the playoffs, this has basically just ended it. It'd be interesting to see what they do now, whether they keep Bruce till the end of the season or whether they act fast and try and get a manager in now to assess the players before the start of next season. Um, for Bristol City, Vyman, another goal and assist. He just keeps returning. Um, and Semenyo went off injured. Um, so yeah, I don't have too much to say. I'm I'm not sure Bristol City or West Brom are going to be in my thoughts for the rest of the season. Apart from targeting Bristol City, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I nearly threw Andy Vyman in just because I haven't I haven't owned him at any point, and I thought, well, he might just return, but I didn't, and it's not one of those. I was going to pick this person because in reality I ruled him out relatively quickly. But he keeps returning. He's doing a very good job for them, which is a statement of almost how poor they've been this season. That he's done so well, and they're still 18th,
Yeah,
which says a lot really in the end. But yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. We asked after game week 38, whether West Brom were going to push on at all, whether the Fulham win was going to be the start of something down the stretch. Neither of us were really convinced that it was, and they had to rescue a point late against Bristol City. Like, if there was any sort of indication that it wasn't a fresh start at all, that was it.
especially with Reach scoring the winger.
Adam Reach, Steve Bruce's favourite player. I think they'll probably keep Steve Bruce on. It wouldn't surprise me if they get to next season and Steve Bruce is still in charge of the team. To be honest, I don't think they should, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's how it ended up. But like you say, it's difficult to look at them sort of in terms of assets wise going forward. Carlin Grant got the penalty, which was something. I went with Gardner Hickman, which really didn't go to plan. That was a 1-pointer. Adam Reach. I think the equalising goal at the end was an Adam Reach goal, and I think a Jake Livermore assist. So a great one for Gaffr. But yeah, I mean, you can clearly still target Bristol City with attacking players. West Brom, there's probably going to be the odd good game for them, but it still sort of feels like, you don't really want them in your team at this point. Carlin Grant is probably going to be decent, but do you really want to use one of your 3 forward spots on Carlin Grant? Not for me, really. So,
No.
so yeah, I'll probably be steering clear of these, but it was sort of a noteworthy game, particularly like you say, with that's probably the final nail for West Brom in terms of the playoffs. They're 7 points off now, but they're in 12th, so it's not just the points; it's the number of teams they'd have to overhaul as well that I just don't see happening. Bristol City will just drift along to the end of the season. In terms of teams that could do with a managerial change, they might be one as well, but I don't think they're going to do anything either. But we'll move on to our next game, which I'm sure you're eager to talk about. Hull 1, Luton 3. So yeah, talk to us about this one.
Yeah, just a good game for Luton. We saw midweek Luton hammered Preston 4-0, and I think we played the same team apart from Burke, who got injured during the game. Didn't play, and we played Onyedinma right wing back. And as I said, Bree moved into right sided centre back. Just started really well. Hull couldn't cope with our press. Adebayo scored. We had a couple of shots from Luke Berry, long range. Hull did cause us some problems. Lewis Potter was quite good on the wing, and obviously, as you expect, when we're playing a winger and four fullbacks in your back five, Eves is going to cause a bit of problem. But yeah, the second half it basically was game over when we nicked the ball off their centre back and Adebayo who passed to Cornick, and I think Cornick wasn't expecting it because he had to take a touch, whereas normally you just stroke that in. But yeah, it was a calm finish, and then Bree, who I don't think he's ever beat the wall, or it's gone miles over. Just probably one of the best free kicks you ever see, or it looks better because it hits the underside of the bar. But yeah, 3-0. Bit sloppy at the end to concede the last minute goal, which was a bit annoying. Um, but yeah, when you um, take into account we've got no centre backs, to concede like one goal in 2 games isn't terrible. And hopefully we can just recover and get some centre backs back. Because I don't fancy playing Millwall with four fullbacks and a winger, especially from set pieces. So yeah, I don't know any news about the length of the injuries or anything, but I hope you'd like to think maybe a couple of them will be back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing. Luton. There's a few teams, and Luton are one of them, where it feels like the international break has come at a good time. Yes, you're playing well, but just
Yeah,
getting some of those players back, even if you just get one or two back, and you're playing a more normal back three, that's all it
yeah,
takes, really. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think it was a good result. It was a good performance, good result. Keep that sort of progression towards finishing in the playoff places. Obviously, up to third now,
yeah,
which which is particularly sort of I think important to start building that cushion, because I think there are teams that will sort of get overhauled at this point by the chasing teams, the likes of Middlesbrough and Forest, and so almost putting both more points and more teams between you and them is always a good thing.
yeah,
For Hull, it wasn't great, but they seem to just sort of basically be drifting along towards the end of the season. They're probably not going to get dragged into it. They probably need sort of, in reality, 4 to 6 more points, maybe slightly
I'm not.
more. They just need a
I'm
couple
not
of
even
results, I
sure
think,
they need that. I
to
think
be
that'll
to
be
be
fine.
truly safe. Like, as in, if they got
Yeah,
if they
yeah,
came out and got, like, sort of a win and a draw, or a couple of wins in the next sort of 4 or 5 games, it's all over. But yeah,
yeah,
I think they're probably fine anyway. Like, it's 13 points to Barnsley. Barnsley do have a game in hand, but they've only got 8 games left and have to make up 13 points. That's very tough to achieve. So
yeah,
they're probably safe at this point. Um, you're not really going to be looking at them. The most notable thing for them was that Baxter was back on the bench, and it wouldn't surprise me after the international break if he comes back in goal. Um, Otherwise, it would just sort of be trying to get more work in, I guess, under the new manager, preparing for next season now. Um, Luton, I mean, in terms of Gaffr assets, you've got Bree. For those who are still on Naismith, we'll see what
mhm,
happens. It sounded at a couple of points like he was a possibility for the weekend and then didn't play, so I would guess that there's a decent chance he's back after the break.
I'm not sure we're going to find out though,
Oh no, no,
100%. So,
no. We won't find out. If we do, it'll be a very pleasant surprise.
and
Um,
Cor- and like I said on the other day, Cornick and Jerome are going to share minutes.
yeah,
Um, so in a double, he's probably going to play 90 to 100 minutes, probably.
yeah, and I mean, yes, he can return, and if you're willing to sort of take that, then there are far worse options to go with. But yeah, it is worth bearing that in mind. I think if you wanted someone really safe and dependable to play, we've mentioned it before, but it would be someone like Alan Campbell, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Adebayo's fine. He's
yeah.
going to play. He's going to have 2 weeks off.
Yeah, so sort of any sort of lingering after effects from the couple of knocks he's had should be fine now.
Yeah, it should be fine.
The next game we've got was, we've talked about Dominic Solanke, was the aforementioned sort of surprising to us 3-0 away win for Bournemouth against Huddersfield. I'll sort of start us off on this one, I guess. It was quite interesting because we weren't really sure what to think of Bournemouth. They'd sort of been struggling, and I know Scott Parker's made comments about, this was the first game they'd sort of taken the shackles off. And that was clear from sort of watching, it was the first time in a while it really felt like he really sort of let the team go and attack an opposition, which was an interesting choice against Huddersfield of all teams, given some of the teams they've played recently, that it was Huddersfield where he was finally sort of like, right, go and attack. But yeah, I mean, I thought they played really well in this game. They dominated. And it was all about Solanke, really. I mean, he sets up Anthony for the first. I think he's involved in the second one. I think it's his shot that's saved, and then Lees makes a mess of it, and Lerma hooks in the rebound, and then it's a great finish for the third one, the sort of flick finish there, to get it into the corner. And yeah, I think Billing being back in the team probably helped as one of those two sort of one of the two either side in midfield. And I think, the other thing from a Gaffr point of view we do have to talk about at this point is that's a run of games now for Jayden Anthony. He's quite clearly in there. And even for people with Solanke, I've said it before, I know I've said it to you, but I think I've said it on the pod as well. I don't think it's the worst idea to double up on him and Solanke. I like him at the moment. I think he's been playing well for them. Even with all the attacking options they've got, he's playing every game at this point. Often he's staying on while others get replaced as well. So I think he's a very interesting one at this point. You've still got the same ones. You've got Solanke, you've got Billing, you've got someone like Ryan Christie, who's clearly first choice on the other side. I think someone like Mark Travers as well. If you're looking for the sort of defensive side of it, particularly with the doubles they're going to have, the run of doubles, someone like Travers or Zamora. But yeah, really good game for them. Huddersfield, obviously, they'll be very disappointed with this one. Bournemouth played well and Huddersfield didn't really. I mean, it's kind of that simple in a lot of ways. They'll still be hopeful in terms of the playoffs and everything, but they'll have to move on swiftly from this result after the break. But yeah, not a great game for them. I think it was in the 4-4-2 again, which they played the last couple. And I'm not sure about it for them. I mean, Huddersfield fans might be able to tell me different, but I don't think it works quite as well for them.
Are they playing 4-4-2, or is it quite fluid though?
I think it is. It probably is more fluid than that, but I think it's certainly more of a. I mean, they've more moved away from the back three.
I know what you're saying, but they could just. Turton at times has played right side as centre back, and and Thomas could drop in. So
yeah. But yeah, it's not a great result for them. I'm sure they'll just sort of look to move on from it swiftly, which is the downside for them when you go into an international break on a result like that. On the Bournemouth side, I guess the big question on that is, Parker talked about it being their best all-around performance and sort of taking the shackles off. Do you think that's actually going to stick, or do you think, because I'm pretty sure we've heard him say something similar before and it's not really followed through, but do you think there's a chance it's different now, or do you think it's sort of going to be the same thing still?
I hope so. I've said numerous times that this Bournemouth side should be up with Fulham, and the main difference is Fulham attack teams, whereas Bournemouth go a goal up and then sit back. Bournemouth should be just trying to outscore everyone and not worry so much about defence, really, because they've got the players that will outscore most teams. Um, like you mentioned, it complete difference from the last few games. I thought there was a good tempo from Bournemouth with and without the ball. Um, and I thought another interesting thing was they brought Smith straight back in at right back, even though they've got Stacey and I can't remember the other Swansea guy,
Uh, Led.
Led. So they brought back in the experience of Smith straight away. So yeah, I've got two Bournemouth, not Christie, Slanky and Zamora. Um, they've got a lot of fixtures. Might be worth taking a punt, maybe towards the end of the season where they've got the doubles. Have to wait and see which player, probably.
Yeah, yeah. I do think there's options there, though. Even if it's sort of the same old Bournemouth we've seen all season, that still means options from them, Gaffer
Yeah.
wise. So. But we'll move on to our next game. Speaking of Gaffer options as well, Sheffield United 2, Barnsley 0. Dan, kick us off on this one.
Yeah, Sheffield United obviously won. A lot of people had Sharp captain or Gibbs White captain, and Sharp was the one player I was worried about really going off because I didn't own him. Uh, Vice captain Gibbs White, and he eventually did get a goal. So did Berg, who's scored quite a lot of goals recently. Him and Gibbs White are playing just behind Sharp. He now seems up to match fitness, and he's really showing his class. I think they spent like 15 to 20 million on him in the Premier League, so probably shouldn't be playing in the Championship. Still a makeshift back five. Um, they're another team who, fitness wise, probably quite happy with the international break, although they did have a few players back on the bench. Um, I thought it's quite interesting that Fodrington's got 8 clean sheets in 10. I think that's at home. Um, we've mentioned that he's a decent option as a keeper if needed, but I thought Barnsley actually started the game quite well, and they missed a quite a good chance from Wolf in the first half, where if they goes in, maybe it's a different game. Coming into the game, the doubt was if Morris was going to be fit, but he was, so it was near enough full strength Barnsley. But I think it's just one of them. Sheffield United at home are very good, um, and as we predicted in our predictions, we didn't think they'd win, they'd get hammered, but it was a comfortable victory in the end. So results didn't go Barnsley's way with Reading winning, but it's all leading up to that game week 40 match of Reading against Barnsley, where Barnsley probably have to win now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that match.
Yeah, it's really living up to its billing of the biggest game in the game week. Yeah, I mean, I think, we've talked about Fotheringham before. It almost felt like he was in there by default initially, but he's done very well.
Yeah,
Very good save to deny Wolf, I think it was. I thought it was past him and he managed to keep it out. But yeah, I mean, Berg and Gibbs White both playing really well at the moment, and I think that's big for them. And I think it's helped having that extra sort of performer higher up the pitch has helped mask some of their defensive issues in terms of personnel. Like when you lose that many players, you're going to be a bit less solid at the back, just naturally. I think it was big for them to start getting players back. I mean, McBurney was back on the bench in this one and came on. Fleck was back on the bench in this one and came on. Ender Stevens was back on the bench, which was quite interesting because they basically said he was unlikely to be involved. And that for anyone who's gone with Norrington Davies, that's one to bear in mind, that Stevens is now back in the squad. So you would imagine he won't be that far away from returning to the team. The big one will be sort of whether Baldock is back after the break as well, because I think credit to Ben Osborne, he's solid to good wherever he plays, but it changes things when you've got him playing right wing back. But yeah, solid win for them. Barnsley, obviously, this was always going to be tough, but they've got a couple of decent games coming up, I think, soon. Particularly that game against Reading, that's obviously massive. They then play sort of Millwall, which is tougher. Swansea, which will be winnable, and then they play Peterborough. So, there's some decent games there for them, and for those on Bassey, he's still a decent asset to have. I'm sure a lot won't be playing him this week with the amount of doublers people have, but I still think he's a perfectly decent asset to have, and I'm certainly in no rush to sell him. But we'll move on to the next game we've got, which this was an annoying one for me with my team, but QPR, not as half as annoying as it was for QPR fans. QPR 1, Peterborough 3. Dan, talk to us about this one.
Yeah, a bit surprised that a lot of people on the Underhaul, or even if they weren't, were bringing in definitely Chair. A few people brought in Andre Gray. The odd few people were bringing in defenders as well. I saw Dickey about. And they started the game quite well, QPR, and they scored, went 1-0 up, and then they just missed loads of chances to make it 2 or 3-0. At one point, Chair played it through to Gray, and he tried to lob the keeper and went wide. I know you weren't particularly happy with that, as you owned both. And then, literally just before Peterborough scored, Andre Gray hit the post, and it literally went down the other end, and Clark Harris tucked it away, so it was 1-1 at half time. And then you're like, okay, well, QPR are going to come out second half and really take the game, but it wasn't. It was the other way around. Peterborough won a penalty through Ward. Clark Harris scored, and then literally a minute later, Marriott with a great strike, top corner. And I'm not quite sure what Warburton was thinking, but you need a goal, and you take off your striker. And I just don't know what you're thinking, really. I was shocked. I didn't even realise he'd done it because I was watching Red Button, and I didn't have it that loud. But yeah, I was like, "Where's Andre Gray?" And then I realised they took him off, and they brought on Thomas, Hendrick, and Austin. And Austin doesn't move anymore. He just stands around and he'll score if it's put to him on a plate. But yeah, this is a worrying performance. And then today we found out that Willock is out for the rest of the season. So what chance they did have of making the playoff, it's looking very slim, with them now being out of the playoffs, and with Forest and Middlesbrough having games in hand. I struggle to see QPR finishing in the top 6 now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. Yeah, this wasn't great. I mean, obviously, it was very frustrating given the number of chances. involving just Chair and Andre Gray that there wasn't more. I think both of them hit the woodwork. There was one where Gray missed, like you say, Gray missed after being set up by Chair and everything. I had the Twitter notifications on. If anyone wants to know how seriously I take this podcast, I destroy my Twitter notifications by having notifications on all the championship teams, which when they're putting out sponsored content is incredible, getting 15 tweets of the same thing. But I thought it was an error by the admin when on 58 minutes they said that Andre Gray was going off. I just, you're 3-1 down. Like, you're going to go for the game. I understand bringing Charlie Austin on and everything, but I was like, but you took Andre Gray off? Like, if anything, by bringing Jeff Hendrick on, you're subtracting the number of attacking players on the pitch. I'm not sure the move to bring him in has really worked for them, given that he's done precisely nothing. Which doesn't surprise me. I didn't think much of Jeff Hendrick before. I still don't think much of Jeff Hendrick. But it was just very strange. I understand sort of going radical to change the game after going 3-1 down as well. But that one in particular felt a bit strange. I mean, obviously, I still got a return from him, so it's not the end of the world. But yeah, a little bit frustrating for me. A lot frustrating for QPR fans. Peterborough, unfortunately, it feels like, again, it's going to be too little too late for them. I do feel like they're good for a goal in games, though. It was the one thing we were talking about before. Clark Harris seems to have, in the last sort of 4 weeks or so, probably, finally sort of got a run and got a few goals. And unfortunately, it's probably going to come too late. And then Jack Marriott, we saw what he was doing before his injury. It's just unfortunate that he got a long-term injury as well. But he's hit the ground running since he came back. He scored against Fulham. He scored again in this. And he tends to score good goals. He's clearly a good finisher. It wouldn't surprise me to see him back in the Championship next season, even if Peterborough aren't. Which I don't think they will be at this point. I'm not ruling them out, but I don't think they'll make it either. But credit to them. I think they've been a bit better, but I do think they took advantage of a poor performance from QPR, both in terms of at times just their performance and at times just their ability to put their chances away. And Peterborough were able to then sort of capitalise after that. So, but yeah, the real story obviously as well is, like you say, Willock out for the season. Marshall's ruled out for the rest of the season as well, but they've brought in Kieran Westwood, who's a perfectly fine goalkeeper. They're on goalkeeper number 4 or whatever, but they've, he'll probably do fine for them, particularly to the end of the season, or if Dieng can make it back before then until he makes it back. But it's not great for them, and I do think they'll sort of just fade away a bit now, probably end up in about 10th spot, which will be a disappointment for them. But I don't really see a way that they bounce back at this point, unfortunately. But we'll move on to our next game. Stoke 2, Millwall 0. I nearly went even heavier on Millwall in my underhaul. Glad I didn't now. We'd definitely be lying if we saw this result. If we said we saw this result coming. But yeah, Dan, talk to us about this one.
Yeah, like you said, I had brought in McNamara a couple of weeks ago. Been collecting points on my bench. First time I start him and he gets 1 pointer, but I think Millwall missed a Phobe in this match. Obviously couldn't play with Stoke being his parent club. Stoke are like this. Like, it's not going to be an easy game to go there. And if Stoke score and they start being up for the game, it can become a tricky game because they've got the players. Another assist for Baker, who's probably looking like one of the best January bit of business anyway. Finally got his points, 11 of them, so I was quite happy with that. But yeah, Wallace missed the penalty. A lot of people brought him in for on their underhaul or just gradually bringing him in because I think Millwall do have a decent set of games long term. Um, but yeah, quite a frustrating game. Um, I don't have too much more to say about it, to be honest.
No, I mean, I think, Stoke definitely created more chances in this game. I think it was interesting that they made a couple of changes, particularly to, I think, one of the big things almost to say is to get slightly more attacking personnel on the pitch. I think that's been a bit of an issue for them recently, but, having probably Vrancic, Brown, Wright Phillips, and Madger all on the pitch. Like, I mean, I know Vrancic plays in midfield, but it's a much more sort of, progressive midfield player than some of the guys they do play. I think that probably did help them a little bit. Just it changes the mindset a bit more when you've got more attacking players on the pitch. You're naturally going to be on the front foot a little bit more, at least in theory. But I think they have become a bit negative with just only having two attackers on the pitch previously, basically when they've been playing the 3-5-2. But yeah, it's a strange one, really. Millwall had been doing so well recently, and it was quite poor performance from them. I know, sort of, Jamie said in all seriousness that not just have a dig that he didn't think that Millwall were very good on Saturday. Obviously the Jed Wallace penalty, it's a poor penalty from him. Bonham does his job and keeps it out, but that was obviously a frustrating one for a number of people. The fact that it was a goal in each half just makes it even worse for anyone on Millwall defensive assets. And yeah, Lewis Baker and Jacob Brown again. We've sort of mentioned him a few times recently, but that's another goal for him. Another attacking return for Baker, and I think you can do a lot worse than look at those two. They do have the double in 40. I know, like, a lot of teams do, but you can do worse than those two, either having them already or if you're looking around at people to bring in. I don't think they're the worst options. Millwall, I mean, in theory, the defenders, maybe a Jeb Wallace, like you say, they've got a decent run. Their double isn't bad. Then Barnsley, Preston, Hull. If you've got particularly a defender like a McNamara or a Wallace, it's not the end of the world. This result, it's just it's one of those days. But the run, if nothing else, the previous form, it looks like a blip, and their run sort of makes it worth holding on to them. The next game we've got is Derby 1, Coventry 1. So Dan, talk to us about this one.
Yeah, this was the lunchtime game, so I watched it. Probably the big news was no Victor from the start or Madsen, which is a bit annoying because I had Victor. Derby again didn't start without a striker. The young winger Ebiweli or something. Do you know how to pronounce that name,
Ebby
Angus?
away.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I thought he was a bit tricky. Caused Coventry a lot of problems. Good goal for Coventry in the first half. Neat play between O'Hare and Godden. Godden finally scoring. O'Hare getting an assist. Another return while I don't own him. And then second half, Lawrence won and scored a penalty. Can see why it was given in when it was live. I thought it was a penalty. Not so sure when I saw the replays. And then Coventry tried to win the game, brought on victory, missed basically two one-on-ones. and Sibley hit the post in injury time for Derby. Um, this draw helps nobody. Coventry look like they're mid-table, and Derby, this result's probably relegated them. I think it's too many points now.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for them, they've dropped a series of sort of points at the wrong time. It's still like sort of only 8 points for them to get out of it, but particularly the number of games they're drawing. It's not even the sort of defeats or anything. It's the draws for them that's the real issue. I thought Ebiaway did look bright. I will say I thought it was a terrible dive from him for the
Oh yeah,
penalty
terrible.
shout,
Yeah.
but he'll learn. Either he'll learn not to dive or he'll learn to dive better. There were a couple of other penalty shouts, obviously, but they did get one in the end, and I do think that was a penalty, well taken by Lawrence. But I think, like you say, O'Hare, I've been saying to people who've been asking me about midfielders, particularly cheap midfielders, I've been saying O'Hare. I'm reluctant to go there because, it's been sort of very mixed in the past, but he's still a potentially good asset to have, and I do think we knew that it would probably help with when Godden got back, and that does seem to have been the case. It's a little bit makeshift at the back. It'd be interesting to see the situation they can get back to after the break, because obviously they had Sheaf starting at centre back again, and they lost Clark Salter after 13 minutes and brought Maatson on. So it did get a little bit makeshift for them at the back. I'm not sure how much better that will get after the break. I know they had, it's varying degrees of injury, but they're probably sort of fading away from playoff contention as well. There'll still be a tough opposition for people, but it's going to be tough for them to sort of push towards the playoffs. They are only 6 points off, but it's that sort of being in 11th and having to overtake that number of teams as well. That will probably be quite tough. But yeah, I think from a Gaffr point of view, O'Hare, Godden, I wouldn't be sort of scared of owning Victor still, but I'd be a little bit concerned that, the rotation that we saw before Godden's injury, where they could sort of be out of the team in any given game, is probably back now. So that's something to bear in mind as well. We've got 2 games left to go. So the next one that was another annoying one for me, there's a theme here, was Reading 1, Blackburn 0. So Dan, I don't know sort of what you have on this one.
Just Swift was on the bench. Cadra started for Blackburn at right wing back and then got injured. So my pick of I'll bring in Cadra. I think he got subbed off early both times, so that's not gone well. So he could be out this week. I thought Reading were the better team. Kaminsky kept Blackburn in the game numerous times. Although Dak had a shot and it was saved, and the rebound fell for Gallagher, who somehow managed to fall over the ball. He's had a chance since Brereton Diaz has been out, and he's just not taking it at all, Gallagher. So not been that impressed with him lately, to be honest. I'm wondering if after the international break, Dak is going to get in this side, because from the highlights I've watched recently, whenever he comes on, he's just they instantly look a lot better side. So I know their fixtures are quite decent as well, Blackburn, towards the end of the season, because they had that notoriously hard run just after Christmas, and at Dak at 6.2. It's not the worst pick, but I don't think they've got that many doubles either. So, yeah. Maybe it's one of the ones to keep in your back pocket for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're probably going to fade away out of the playoff spots now as well. They're currently sat in sixth, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Middlesbrough and Forest both finish ahead of them. Whether both those two finish in the playoffs, I'm not as sure, but I think both of them will probably finish ahead of Blackburn now. Brereton Diaz has gone away with Chile. I know at the very least Chile wanted to sort of have their own look at him, which I understand national teams doing. They don't sort of want to, take clubs' words for it. The number of times it's sort of been like, oh, he's injured. International break is over. Oh, he's coincidentally fit again. Like,
I can understand that, Angus, but he's been out for what, nearly a month. But I can understand if it happened this game week and then oh, he's suddenly injured, but he's been injured for a month. They would have played him if he was fit. So
yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say, and it's bizarre for Mowbray to do, but the way he was talking about it, it almost felt like he was not playing him this week because he didn't want him to go away with Chile. Which would be a bizarre way to approach it, but that was, it wouldn't be crazy given some of his comments about it. But I also think, for example, for Chile, World Cup qualification is on the line. They're gonna sort of want, even if they can get half an hour out of him in the second game, that might be the difference maker for them, particularly given his early record for Chile. But we'll see. I did sort of think I predicted when we did the predictions and the best assets from each game, I said Gallagher, and I was like, oh, here's my moment, and then he fell over. Yeah, like you say, I mean, I went with Kaminsky on my underhaul, and I was beginning to think that was a bit of a brainwave until Josh Laurent decided to just ping one in, ping one in. I've seen reports today as well that Lenihan has had a scan and might be out for a while, which would obviously be big for them, and another one where it's the sort of injury that could really end their sort of push towards the playoffs. Really, he's very important for them in that back three, and with how settled that back three has been, taking him out of there could make a big difference. Cadra, it remains to be seen how bad his injury is, but I think that's one they can probably withstand a bit more.
He's going, Angus. Don't worry about that. He's going out by team quickly, or he's going number 3 on the bench.
Yeah. But I think they have probably a greater capability to withstand that injury, particularly with Dolan, one or two that will be back. But yeah, I mean, I think that their hope will be Brereton Diaz is back after the international break, and maybe they can sort of just do enough to make a playoff spot. But it's looking tougher for them at this point, to be honest. Even Buckley came back into the lineup. For those who own him in Gaffr, he got booked and went off after 59 minutes. So that's a painful one. And I'm not sure whether he'll stay in the 11, particularly because he's one of these players. Once Brereton Diaz is back and you're looking at Dak potentially starting, he is one who could drop back out of the team. Obviously, he's been on the bench for a few games, so I'm not sure this will have really helped his case, unfortunately, because I do think he's an interesting young player, but it might be, in terms of meaningful minutes, it might actually be next season before we see him again. On the Reading side, I mean, Swift came on, I think, after half an hour and looked to slot right in. They were playing well and he helped that. So would you advise people looking at him again?
Swift is a good player, and I would never not say to get Swift because he's so good on bonus and things like that, but yeah, I'm not really looking at him, to be honest.
No, although I do think, particularly people looking at playing something like midfield dynamos in 40, he could be a good option for you.
Yes, an option.
And the last game, I'm not sure how much we're going to have to say about this one, was Swansea 0, Birmingham 0. Dan, what do you have on this one?
I said Patterson got injured in the warm up, and Birmingham should have won this match. They missed five big chances. So all you Christie um, Gaffr managers got very lucky with this clean sheet.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the highlights seem to be Birmingham efforts. Obviously, the big news was Patterson, like you say, Patterson injured in the warm up. Russell Martin has said that it was, I think, a tight muscle, and he might have even been able to play with it, but they just decided it was better to sort of keep him out and not have to take him off after about 15 minutes, or not run that risk rather than sort of, for the sake of one game. But he did seem to think that Patterson would be back available after the international break. So for those who've brought him in, it's probably not sort of a big issue for you, fortunately. Although I do think it probably had a negative effect on them in this game. But that's all the games. So we're not going to do any predictions today. Obviously, we'll do sort of an exclusively Game Week 40 preview next week sometime ahead of the deadline, which is on Friday. So we'll have something out for you just to preview Game Week 40 at that point. So we are going to do your Twitter questions, and that'll be it. But I will just say, I can confirm that the much anticipated anything but Gaffr Q&A with Jamie returning will be going ahead, and we will be recording on Sunday. A tweet will go out on... We're recording Tuesday night. A tweet will probably go out on Wednesday from the pod account. I didn't want to put it out before this, just to confuse anyone who still wanted... Just so not to confuse anyone who still wanted to ask us questions for this pod. But tweet will probably go out on Wednesday for all your questions. It can be football related, as long as it doesn't relate in any way to Gaffr. But anything at all. We're within reason. There are certain things we will not discuss on the pod. But ask us anything. Really do. Weird questions. Different questions, simple questions, whatever. We welcome them, and you know what Jamie's like. If you want to ask him about his opinions on people on Hollyoaks, I'm sure he'd greatly appreciate that. So that will be recording on Sunday. A bit of a international break special, but the tweet will go out, and fill that up with questions. We're looking forward to it. But in terms of the questions from this one, we've got a few questions here that we'll get into before the end of the pod. The first one I've got here is from FPL Commander, and he said this team potentially has several injuries going into Game Week 40. So is it a good idea to go from Buckley to Swift, as he has 3.3 million in the bank, and play the Goalfest boost and hope for the best? Or are there any upgrades you may suggest? So just he's sent a screenshot just to quickly go through it. He's got Fotheringham in goal, Williams, Spence, Bree, Zamora, Willock, Patterson, Christie, Gibbs, White, Mitrovic, Solanke. On the bench, he's got Moore, Victor, McFadzean, and Buckley. So obviously one of the things that's changed since he asked that question is the Willock injury news. I probably would have advised replacing him anyway, because it didn't necessarily sound like it was going to be a short-term injury. That he was probably at least going to miss that week. Obviously now we've found out he's going to miss the rest of the season, so he's a definite sell. Although I do think something like Swift in for him is still a viable move, but I think given that you're probably going to want 15 doublers ideally if you want to play Goalfest, I think that's a good thing to have, particularly of the midfielders and attackers, or midfielders and forwards all being doublers. I'd probably look to replace Buckley anyway, but I think particularly I would play Goalfest this week, by the way, just as a base point looking at your team, but I'd probably look to replace Willock and Buckley for I guess I would guess a -4. Dan, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
Nothing really to add. I would probably do the same. Get rid of Willock and Buckley. Daniel Johnson for Preston's not a terrible option either this week.
Brennan Johnson.
Um, Brennan Johnson as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of
Yeah,
options.
yeah, I think that's the big thing. There are definitely options there, and I do think that those are the two to replace really. Renard 9, another team screenshot. You know, this is great. Once I've mastered more of the sort of like the video and putting things on the on the screen, it will probably help a little bit for the people sort of. I mean, it won't help for the audio, but for the YouTube to sort of get a bit more clarity rather than like just us talking through people's screenshots. But it's fine to ask them that way. It's just once I master it, it will be a little bit more interactive for people, I'm sure. But he's asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, just how fucked are those of us without boosts left? And if Patterson is out, who would you replace him with? Back to Carvalho? So he's got Moore in goal, he's got Murray Wallace, McNair, Zamora, Harry Wilson, Patterson, Berg, and Gibbs White, Mitrovic, Adebayo, and Solanke. He's got Willock, Davis, and Clark Salter on the bench. So like we said, I think Patterson will be okay. We should get more news. Russell Martin is one who tends to be quite forthcoming with injury news, so we should have clarity after the break, hopefully. But obviously now Willock is the sell. He's another one with Willock. In terms of those of us without boosts, how fucked we are on a scale of 1 to 10? Dan, what do you reckon the number is on that scale?
I'm not sure, to be honest. We're going to go down, I think, because
Yeah.
I think it's been a lot of the key players double when there's so many teams doubling that everyone's going to have 11 players. So I'm going to get a red arrow, or anyone who's not got a boost is going to get a red arrow. I've just tried to look at it as if long term since the start of the boosts, and I think last week I said I was about 300 from now 100 and about 150th. If I drop, it's hard to gauge how much I'm going to drop, but
Yeah.
if I drop 20, 30 places, I'm still quite a lot higher than I was, so we'll see. I'm going to have the same players as everyone else. It's just that hopefully none of them score.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's the lowest game week ever.
Yeah. On the scale of 1 to 10 of how fucked we are without boosts, I'm going to say about a 6.
Yeah.
I don't think it's disastrous, but it's not great either. So I'm going to go about a 6. Owen Walsh has asked, he said, gents, are there any obvious players or teams who will likely not play both games? I know you mentioned Cornick on previous pod. Cheers. Thanks for all the content. Well, thank you, Owen. So in terms of sort of the teams that double, are there any other sort of obvious players that jump out to you as players that might not play both games or are less likely to play both games?
Maybe like a Madsen at Coventry or Victor. Fulham, you never know. Maybe Carvalho doesn't play. Cabano or Bobby Reed, they could rotate. Middlesbrough's pretty settled. Luton, like we said, Cornick. With one of the games being Millwall, I expect Adebayo and Jerome to play that match. Forest have been pretty settled. No, I think the kid, a lot of them now will probably play. Apart from those lot, I don't. Especially as we've just had an international break as well, they should be able to play 2 games really.
Yeah. I think the probably the most relevant one that I would say there's sort of less security about them playing both games now would be Victor. That's probably the most relevant one
Yeah,
now. And I know a number of people brought in Cornick, but we've obviously mentioned him and Owen's mentioned him in the
yeah.
question. So yeah, those are probably the two most relevant ones at this point. Mike Day has asked us, he says he has 2 free transfers and he's considering Cornick or Carvalho in for Cadra to sit on his bench for Goalfest plus a goal scoring defender. Do you have any recommendations for a 5 million defender to sit on the bench but who might nab a goal in the double game week? That's a good question, Mike.
Well,
so as to not have too much silence in there, I'm just going to throw one out there. If he's fit, Cal Naismith.
Possibly, but you're not going to know if he's fit though. That's the problem.
Yes. That's the slight flaw in my plan.
I think Madsen is, but will he play both games? Because we've seen him play a bit further up. A lot of these players are centre backs who are literally just a punt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think there's too many, to be honest. It's a bit tough there, really.
I think it's hard because Madsen's upside is quite a lot, but does he play? I think he's the standout, but it's a risk.
Yeah, I think he's probably the best one. But like you say, there is going to be an element of risk there, but I do think you at that sort of price, you're chasing the goal, particularly if they're going to be on your bench. Even in 1.5 games, or sort of a full game in one and on for 30 minutes in the other, Matson probably has the best chance of any of them of getting a goal.
Yeah, he does, I think.
Ron Mukherjee asks, he says he will be playing the midfield Dynamos in game week 40. He has 2 free transfers. He currently has Wilson, Brennan Johnson and Gibbs White. Who are the other 2 midfielders to get? He can't reach Jed Wallace. So
I think we've mentioned Swift. I think he's the option, isn't he? Daniel Johnson as well for Preston.
Yeah, I think he's another one.
Billing.
Yeah, I mean Billing or maybe Ryan Christie.
Yeah.
He's both of those actually are ones you're probably going to have to wait till. I mean, you should be waiting till after the international break or late next week to make your transfers anyway. But both of those will be away on international duty, so assuming that they sort of come through that unscathed, they're ones you could look at.
Vanderberg.
Yeah, I don't sort of mind that. Your old mate Lewis Baker.
He's on pens, isn't he? So
Patterson, if he's fit, I think he's a good shout.
Yeah. There's definitely options.
Yeah, and I'd also look at he said he's got Brennan Johnson. I'd look at James Garner as well. I think he's doing well for them. George FPL has asked us the best defenders. I assume he means for 40. He said for 39. I assume he means for 40. With fixtures and Goalfest to be played. So the best defenders for 40, particularly on a Goalfest.
McNair. because he might be on penalties. To be honest,
Yeah, that's one for for people who are wondering about McNair on penalties. He's on penalties if Sporar doesn't play. Sporar's number one,
yeah,
McNair's number two.
probably Christie. We've seen how high he gets up.
Yeah,
Whether you're going to get a lot of clean sheets, I'm not sure, but he's definitely an option. Um,
Spence.
it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
Spence is the other one, isn't it?
and probably Bree.
Doesn't
He's not going to
normally.
ping a free kick in every time, but just in terms of the sort of those attacking positions,
Yeah,
is liable to be involved in one. Maybe budget depending, someone like Scott Malone.
yeah.
Um, our next question comes from FPL Red Arrow, who said Swift out for Brennan Johnson? Question mark. I get wanting Brennan Johnson. I'm not sure whether I'd be rushing to sell John Swift though. I don't know what you think, Dan.
Yeah, I'm guessing they're trying to play it for a boost. So it'd be interesting to see his other players because if it's a boost, you probably want both of them this week. Um, although whenever you watch Forest, Johnson's basically playing up front,
Yeah,
and he's one of the decisions I've got to make whether I bring him back in. Because it's not nice watching watching Forest without Brennan Johnson. Um, yeah, I'm not sure about that move. Like I said, I might try and do one of the other midfielders if you could.
yeah. If not, I'd probably. It might burn you, but I would probably rather own Brennan Johnson of the two.
Yeah.
But like you said, I'd probably look at something else if possible. Forever QPR has asked this question. He has asked us, who will score the most goals in the coming double game week?
As in team.
It doesn't specify.
What if we're doing player, I'm gonna go for Solanke.
I was just trying to decide which one of Bournemouth and Fulham I thought had a better double.
There'll probably be someone. Where's Vine? Who's Bristol City got?
They've got a single game
Oh,
week against Bournemouth.
Yeah, maybe not.
No, actually, that feels perfect for Andy Vyman to score a hat trick and outscore
Yeah.
everyone. Yeah, I'll probably go Solanke. There's not a lot else that sort of jumps out to me, really. Yeah, it'll probably be someone from like Blackpool or something. And our last question is Rob Pick. And he's asked us the best striker to bring in to replace Sharp for the Game Week 40 Goal Fest. He's already on Mitrovic and Solanke. He's thinking of Keenan Davis at Forest. Cheers, guys. So, if you're replacing Sharp for a Goal Fest in Game Week 40, where would you be looking, Dan?
Yeah, I don't think that's a terrible option. Maybe Adebayo. They have Millwall, but they also have Peterborough as well. Maybe Archer from
Yeah.
Preston. Derby's defence isn't as great as what it has been. Dare we say Lucas Shaw?
I mean, we probably have to mention him as an option.
Yeah,
Um,
and then maybe Pirro or Bafemi. It's not great, but you never know.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You're getting into sort of less desirable options. I'll go with my. I do think you've mentioned a number of good ones there. I'll just throw out Jaden Anthony again, and then I'll go with my punt on the previous question about who's going to score the most goals this game week. I'm now going to. I've worked out who my punt is for that.
Who's that then?
Johnson Clark Harris.
Johnson Clark. What, against Middlesbrough and Luton?
Yeah, because we were saying it's going to be someone we're not expecting at all. So I'm going to accept Johnson Clark Harris.
I tell you, the last few game weeks, all the dead teams are loving it.
Yeah, exactly.
Raking it in the points now.
Yeah, him or like Gary Medine.
Gary Medine.
But yeah, hope those answers have helped you. That's all the questions we've got. I did clarify with Rob on that question that he was asking about forwards other than Carlton Morris. But he said, unfortunately, because Carlton Morris doesn't have a double, he wasn't going to get him. Which I think is a real shame. But yeah, so that's all we have for this week. Like I say, we'll be recording Q&A on Sunday. The tweet for all your questions will go out on Wednesday. Please do ask us lots of questions because this could be sort of a really fun one. So yeah, and then we'll be back with a preview next week. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.